Welcome to Rocky Mountain Marketing. I'm your host, Katie Brinkley. Join us as we dive deep with the world's leading digital marketing experts every single Tuesday. It's all about giving you the strategies that are working right now, directly from those who are making an impact. With my 20 years of experience, I'm here to help you navigate the world of digital marketing. Whether you're looking to sharpen your skills or transform your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started on today's journey to success. Welcome back to this week's episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing. Today's guest, we're doing something a little bit different, but I had to bring this person on because he and I have been running around in the same circles since the days of Clubhouse. I feel like I met so many amazing people on Clubhouse that I've continued the relationship. That app is long gone now. But today's guest and I met on Clubhouse. We got to meet in real life at PodFest. Now we've seen each other at PodFest, Podcast Movement. He had me speak for one of his virtual summits. He is a all-around amazing human being. And when I invited him to come on today's show, he was kind of a little hesitant, which I was like, wait, what? You don't want to come and share your brilliance with my audience? He was like, well, I do, but let's have a conversation about something that we're both really passionate about. So today's guest is none other than Steve Stewart. We're actually going to be talking about the book, Profit First. This book has really revolutionized the way that I approach my business, and Steve has a lot of great ideas and insights when it comes to this book as well. Steve, I have to thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show, share your brilliance, and really have a high-level conversation about something that has affected both of our businesses. We didn't come up with the concept. We're just big fans of it. So Steve, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. It's not my brilliance. This is just a great concept that really boils things down and makes, I'm going to call it budgeting, but also doing your own accounting and books, not really like for taxes, but keeps things easy. My bookkeeping has never been more easy to deal with than it's ever been. I have been in a personal finance like nerd for almost 2 decades.
Well, that's your day job. I know you produce 20 episodes a week for different finance podcasts, right? So like Stacking, The Benjamin Show, Afford Anything. I mean, like you have a number of podcasts that you are editing every single week, this realm of the personal finance space. That's your day job. You're a huge podcast fan like me. That's your day job. But let's talk about how we can apply this for our businesses. Just really quick, tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do. And then let's dive into how you're applying Profit First.
Yeah, I run a podcast editing business as a solo self-employed person. I fell into this through a community that I was embedded in, and I turned out to be a creator who now is a service provider for those creators in the personal finance genre or investing genre. I've been running small businesses for most of my life. I had a small DJ job of, mobile DJ back when I was in my late teens, and then I was doing more big corporate events. So I always had some kind of small business thing going on. And the bookkeeping wasn't that difficult. But then when I became a full-time self-employed person, as I am now and have been since 2016, okay, now we're talking about we need to have a marketing budget. We have to have more put away for taxes. We can't just have it withheld through our day job. It wasn't until I really started digging into this Profit First method. I know there's a book based on it. Mike Michalowicz came up with this and he presented it really well in a book, but hopefully we can boil it down in 20 minutes to make people go, yeah, I want to try this out, because it's really easy to get into once it's set up and just keeping it maintained.
Let's talk about what this Profit First model is. I'm just curious what drew you to this sort of model and to the book. I was turned on to the book by our mutual friend, Seth Silvers. He and I were on a plane ride home from PodFest in Orlando when we sat next to each other, and he was telling me all about this book, Profit First, and how I had to read it. It was an amazing book. Tell me, what drew you into the Profit First concept, and how have you been applying it for your business?
Yeah, I'd heard about it for years. I think the book came out in 2016, but it wasn't until I heard an interview with Caroline Rivera. She was on a show called the Podcast Editors Mastermind, which is right in my wheelhouse. Of course, I'm going to listen to the show. And they explained it pretty well, but then I think it got me to say, okay, I'm going to go, and I actually bought the audiobook because we're podcast listeners. I listen to audiobooks. I don't read them. It was a bit long, but then once I started to get it, I started to understand, because you start out with the idea that in the old days, we used to think of our money as income minus expenses equals profit. Now, expenses can include your own payroll because you got to pay yourself if you're self-employed. But anything like beyond that is true profit, which you're still going to probably bring home. In the profit first method, it's you get income and you take a sliver of that, whatever percentage you determine, and you put that aside, and that's profit. And the rest is expenses, which again can include your own, I call it payroll. I've always been an advocate for save for yourself first. Put money aside first, save first as a personal finance principle. Invest in yourself first and then use the rest. If you got a 401k at work, the money comes out automatically out of your paycheck. If you've got to have an emergency fund, put money away in savings and the rest is what you're going to use to spend. It's like, oh yeah, no brainer. Let's do that for the business too. Let's take a sliver of what we get from our income and put it away for profit. This whole process that he laid out just made it make so much sense to me.
What were some of the struggles that you had with implementing this profit first sort of model and switching from what we've all had ingrained in us?
I think one is if you listen or read the book, it seems more complicated than it is. I'm always like that. I'm like, what am I forgetting? What am I missing? This is too easy. My biggest problem was just, is it really this easy? It turned out to be that way. Once I got rid of the things that I didn't need to know about, didn't have to focus on, it really just comes down to this simple process. You have one bank account where you have all your income come in. If you've got a side business, that's where the income comes in. By the way, that's also the same account that you should have the money going out. It shouldn't be mixed with your personal banking, your personal accounts at home. From there, you divvy it up into 4 more buckets, or you could have a couple bit more, but he focuses strictly on just a couple of more buckets, which are your profit. We were talking about that. Your owner's comp, that's your payroll, or what I call payroll. You got to pay yourself. The profit and the payroll are 2 different things. Then you've got your operating expenses. We all have expenses. And that's usually what most people think about first is, I got to make money to pay the bills. And then whatever's left over, I get to take home. No, let's flip it on its head. And then the fourth one is taxes, which is probably the most important of all of them. If you think about it, you can really get yourself a lurch there. So if you take all the money from the income bucket and then you divvy it out by percentages, and he gives you a couple examples in there. And I just took the examples that applied to me and tweaked them a little bit as he recommended. Using an Excel spreadsheet, boom, that was super easy. Now there's actually bank accounts that'll make it even easier for you to do this, which makes the execution of Profit First even easier because you don't do anything. You let the money come in. It automatically divvies out the money in the buckets to the percentages that you dictate, and then transfer the money here, spend the money there. It saved me hours of going into bank accounts and doing the things because now I can just sign in to pay bills twice a month. You can do it 3 times a month if you want, but yeah. I like the 10th and the 25th like he recommends. I've also got my invoices that get cut on the 15th of the month and then the last day of the month. So money falls into the account just before I start pulling money out of the account as well. Mm-hmm. And because I'm pulling money out of the account twice a month, we have good cash flow here in the household as well as our personal finances.
Adopting this sort of profit first model changed the way that you manage your business. You said it's kind of flipped it on its head, but can you give us a specific example on how it's really affected the way that you've been managing a lot of your business?
Yeah. I created a spreadsheet that did a lot of the formulas for me, and I have it available to members of my Podcast Editor Academy. Once you put in your actual numbers and then you take his recommendations, you try to over time tweak to fit those numbers because it makes sense what he gives you. You don't need 90% payroll and only 10% taxes. It just doesn't work that way, and no expenses. When I was first doing it, I looked at what I was spending on conferences because I'm pulling numbers from.
I love that you talk about that because I actually was just looking. I'm like, man, so I got to stop. The amount of conferences that I'm paying to go to versus the amount of conferences that are paying me to go to them. I have to make sure that I budget this so that it makes sense. But please continue. Yeah.
So you're pulling your current numbers on your past, obviously. You say, okay, this is what I've been spending. You just pull up your bank accounts and you might categorize. If you're doing good bookkeeping, it should already be pretty much categorized the way you need to know. It's either taxes, expenses, payroll, or profit. All the expenses are pretty much what you're doing in your business. There's not much more than that. It's easy to pick out the rest. When I saw how much I was looking at expenses in conferences, because those were kind of the big numbers. There's not a lot of 3-digit number expenses in my life, and 4-digit numbers really catch my attention. I was looking at it, I was like, okay, I did make a commitment in 2020 when everything was shut down. I want some of these conferences to exist, so I'm actually going to sponsor them. So I did. I sponsored them, and the Podcast Editor Academy sponsored them. But I kept doing it in 2021. So in 2022, when I started Profit First, I was like, okay, this has got to stop. Really, the big change was the fact that it made me focus on one thing that was like, my expenses are way out of whack. Why? Most people are going to cut back on certain expenses. And that was the thing that I decided I've got to do something to cut back on conferences. I'm starting to get there. It's 2024 now. I should almost be there. I'm getting there.
It's interesting because Next Step Social is set up as an S Corp. And when we made that shift to actually having me be an employee at the business, that's when the Profit First system really clicked for me and the way that I'm managing my books, the way I'm spending, like having all these different buckets. I guess for me, that's how it shifted my mindset of like, okay, this is now the business, how much they should make, how much you should make. It shifted everything with my mindset. Where was it for you that really helped you shift your mindset so that you could adapt personally and professionally with this way of doing business?
Personally, I haven't changed. You talk about their personal finances, that hasn't changed at all. This is really just a way that I could take and put the idea of Profit First is you're saving money for these things. So you're never caught behind. If you've got debts and stuff, you can implement a plan that kind of pays off the debts as well. But this helps you to be ready to put in a big chunk of money for quarterly expenses because you only take out money from your tax bucket. I call them buckets once every 3 months if you're doing quarterly estimates. You might do it more frequently, but I'll tell you what, right now with interest rates at 4.5%, it's really great to throw this money every week or every 2 weeks into a savings account and let it grow. Man, yeah. I love it. I mean, that just made it a lot easier for me to understand that I am saving for each of these categories and I'm not doing it in a haphazard way. I was actually now paying more attention to what was going in each bucket and how much. It's funny when you're getting paid from your business and you say, okay, I brought in, let's just use a big round number. I brought in $100,000 in revenue. And I got to bring home 40. Okay, wake up call. What? Right. In a business like mine, what are the expenses? I already own a computer. I'm not buying big expensive things. It's a lot of services are manageable. $20 a month Riverside account or whatever. Yeah. Those are manageable. So it really makes you look at it in these big buckets, and then you can dive deeper into see what the problem is.
How hard was it for you? Let's back up again because we've been talking about these 4 buckets a lot. Let's just make sure everyone grasps what those 4 buckets are. So explain the 4 buckets again for us, and then I'm going to ask you my next question.
Sure. So actually there's 5, but the first bucket is the income bucket. And then from there, the money goes to the 4 different buckets mentioned earlier, which was profit. I'm still at only 2% profit. You think there should be more than that? I'm working on it. The second is it's called owner's comp, but that's what I call payroll. And Katie, you call it payroll too, because this allows us to bring money home and we can dictate exactly how much that is, or we can use it as a percentage like Profit First recommends. Yeah. And that makes you really want to earn more too, by the way. Number 3 is operating expenses, which focuses on just what you're spending money on. If you see something out of the ordinary, make some changes there. And then the 4th is taxes, which I was surprised that I was only needing to save 15% in taxes. I really thought it should be more. When you start to cut back on expenses and stuff like that, you have more money to put towards these things. It does make you a little bit more efficient. So those are the 4: profit, owner's comp or payroll, operating expenses, and taxes.
Yeah, the government definitely makes sure that you never miss paying them. So make sure you have the taxes bucket set up. For me, again, when I moved to an S Corp, that's when the mind shift was really easy for me to grasp on this whole profit first mentality. If someone's just, maybe this is kind of a new concept for them, this different type of buckets. Maybe they have just spent whatever money that they bring in, that's what they get to keep, and then they're spending the rest. As someone that's trying to adopt this way of running their business and doing their books, what advice would you have for them?
I started by leaving an existing bank account the way it was, but then moving the majority of what I was going to use. I call them it's my operating account. So it's what everything goes into and then comes out of for the buckets. I still had a safety net because sometimes we change bank accounts, and this is personal finance as well. You change a bank account and then there's this once a year recurring bill that comes in. And you didn't remember that this subscription to whatever hits your bank account. Well, if the bank account's closed, either the service gets discontinued or you get dinged in some way. So I left that there. That was a nice safety net. While I was growing into this bank account, which then divvied into the 4 buckets, that helped me to say, okay, this is working. After about 3 months, I was like, okay, I can get rid of that account or I can do something else with it.
I think that for me, the whole sales minus profit equals expenses, that allowed me to scale. It allowed me to bring on another. So, okay, well, instead of me doing this job or it taking this amount of time, I could, so the brand account manager role, that as that next step social, that was something that I was doing for the past 6 years. Last year, I brought on a brand account manager because I realized sales minus profit equals expenses. I had the amount of money that I could delegate that task out and I could afford it and I could pay for it so that now I could try and get more clients in. So I was spending my time differently. Has there been anything for you that's been a light bulb moment like that?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. I had to make sure that when I brought on a video editor, because I'm going to pay them more than an audio editor, just because editing video is really, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah.
Anybody here knows it just takes a lot more to edit videos. I can see that in my operating expense bucket, which technically I have 2 buckets for that. One is just the regular stuff, and then I've got another one called contractors. So I actually have 5 of those buckets that the income bucket filters into. I could see that I could hire more contractors or be able to pay more for the services that the contractors are doing for me. So it's just like you hired a new person. I had a contractor who could do video, which I needed to start adding to the services that I offer to my clients.
Hey there, Rocky Mountain marketing fans. This is Rich Brooks of the Agents of Change. If you're like me, you're a big fan of Katie Brinkley, which is why I asked her to be part of our first ever digital marketing summit. That's right. I've crowded 30 of today's top digital marketers to present at this virtual event running from April 24th through the 26th, and it's absolutely free to attend. You can watch all 30 sessions live, but if you really want to up your marketing game, be sure to check out our 2 VIP packages. Head on over to theagentsofchange.com/Katie Brinkley 2024 and reserve your spot now. I'll see you at the summit.
When did you start applying this for your business?
It was 2022, the fall.
You've been doing it for two
year and
years-ish. A year and a half, 2-ish years now. Was there anything that you've seen that, like a success story that you could share with us? For me, again, it was being able to scale and grow my business. I've been able to sponsor different conferences now. Like I've sponsored Cami Gildner's conference in Golden at the end of 2023. I'm sponsoring an event for the Dames, which is a women's networking group. So I'm finding, okay, so now I have the ability to do sponsors, where before I didn't really even think about that as being an option. Do you have any success stories that you could share with us that you've been able to do since implementing this method?
Yeah, I don't think it would be anything that you could say is tangible, though. It's more that I'm always looking for ways to make it to where I work a lot of hours just because I can. I work from home. I love it. My wife, when she's doing something like, I'll go downstairs and generate more income. Yeah. Because we got a big financial goal coming up in the future. I want to be able to basically pay cash for the next house we move into.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be fantastic if we could. So I've got a goal for that. So how do I balance work and life when I'm working those hours? Just simply by not spending so much time on the banking and the books. It's not a tangible thing. It's just to say, I am now comfortable with my finances. There's money sitting there. If I had to, I could look and say, oh, there's money sitting there. Over time, you get to know there's money sitting there. It's already being divvied up for those future expenses. There's a really huge bit of comfort that comes from that. And because I'm not spending as much time on it, I can then do things like my wife and I went to the movies last Tuesday during the day. It was fantastic. We go to the wineries. We're not too far from the wine trail here in Missouri. We can go and do things. I'm somehow finding a work-life balance in there. And I swear, it seems weird, but the banking piece is just something that I don't have to even think about anymore. It's just a wonderful feeling.
With Profit First, have you made any kind of customizations or changes to the methodology that somebody else might be like a light bulb moment? Oh, okay, I could do that too. Have you changed any part of the approach so that it's a little bit more custom for you and what you're looking for?
Yeah, there's the 2 things, which one is the fact that I have another bucket, which is for my contractors. That's so important that I want to make sure that is definitely, when my contractors send me their invoice, I want to pay them like that. Yeah. I don't want them to wait because that's the way I like to be paid. So I'm going to do it for them as well. But another thing was I found, and I know there's at least 2 types of bank accounts out there now where, let me go back to the book. So Mike McCalloch's book, Profit First, he preaches in there about every one of these accounts needs to be a separate bank account. So you should have one bank account for the income, and then you need to have 4 separate bank accounts for the 4 buckets. And then you need 2 more, which I'm not even going to go into why those 2 more are there, but they're basically saying once you move the money into this tax bucket, you lock it away in a completely different bank somewhere else so you never touch it until it's time. I agree with that. But there's a bank called Novo, which I just love because you set up.
It's called Novo?
Novo is Novo.co.
Okay.
If anybody wants a referral link, I've got one. They'll get a nice little perk.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes here. Hey. So check it out.
Yeah, I think Mike McCallowitz also recommends one. I can't remember if it's called Relay or something like that. But these bank accounts it's basically one bank account. But then you can then dictate whenever money comes into this account, send it out by these percentages. They call them reserves, which I call them buckets. So there's a tax reserve. There's a operating expenses reserve. I've got a contractor's reserve. I've got the profit reserve, and I've got the taxes. I've got those reserves set up now with the percentages that I figured was right for me from my past experiences, and then trying to go towards less expenses, higher profit. That's just one of those safety, time-saving things that I think is fantastic. So that's kind of a hack because there's reasons why Mike McCallowitz says they need to be separate bank accounts. The problem with having it in the same place is you can easily dip your fingers in and grab money from one place and move it to another. I think just for me, seeing it on the screen as separately different types of accounts and then having to go through a couple steps to transfer if I had to, that's the resistance that I need to make sure that I stay on track.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to take money from profit and buy new headphones or something like that.
It's so true, Steve. I think this is a really good example. So my daughters, they're 6 and 9. They have this little bank and it has 3 separate little coin slots to put the money into. It's a save, a share, and a spend.
Yes.
So I'm taking my daughter to Chicago to go to the American Doll store, just me and my 9-year-old. And I was in her room kind of tidying up her dresser. And I was like, Evie, where's all of your spend money? She's like, oh, well, I bought my Stanley water bottle because she had to have a Stanley. And I was like, yeah, but you had more money in there than that. What happened to the rest of it? And apparently there's a school store and she's been buying little squishies at the school store. Well, she has no money to go to Chicago now. I was like, you can't just take all of it. Now you have no money to spend. It's very easy for her just to take off the lid and be like, I want to go do this. So I'm just going to take it real. And it's hard when it's just right there to have that understanding of like, well, wait, no, I'm going to be going and doing this. I need to save this for this upcoming. And like you said, dipping into some of those separate funds. Have you seen anybody have any struggles with kind of explaining, oh no, well, this is the way that it's set up to some bookkeeper or?
Yes, bookkeepers don't traditionally like this type of thing because it's not traditional accounting.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just the way that we're handling our cash flow through our business. But there are accountants. I know Heather Zeitzwolf, who you just had on your show, knows all about Profit First. So she can morph what she does to match what you're doing. So there are accountants out there. And I know Mike McCallowitz has a whole book of people that kind of are, I don't know if you call it sanctioned or qualified under his brand, but the accounting piece can be completely different. But honestly, if you're using something like a Wave apps or QuickBooks, it's not that much different. It's just the accounting piece is now completely separate from what we used to do, which is use our accounting spreadsheets for our profit calculations, where now it's just the bank account that we're using for Profit First is cash flow. That's all it is. And it's forcing us to look at our profit. Are we putting money away for that? Are we paying ourselves right? What about taxes? Are we saving enough for taxes? And of course, operating expenses, I think, is the one that most people can get control of it pretty quickly, or at least, make a plan to control it. Whereas accounting, we're looking way back. We're looking at a whole year. Oh, look, I'm here it is, March 11th of 2024 as we're recording this. I know what my taxes are going to be. I'm just waiting for one more stupid little form to come in the mail to finish.
Yeah.
And I can file my taxes for all of last year. Oh, guess what? I got to write a check for a certain dollar amount that I under withheld. Well, it's March of 2024. Why am I trying to figure out what I needed for 2023? Profit First is going to help me get ahead of that. And then, of course, be ready for this type of thing, which I am. But you're looking at it more frequently, too, Profit First. You can reevaluate your percentages once a quarter, tweak things. And I think that's another one of those time-saving benefits is you're going to be tweaking things along the way.
So you talked about how you have essentially 5 buckets because you have that contractor budget in there. Do you think this is a model that is best for the entrepreneur with contractors, like solopreneur with contractors, or can a business like a real estate brokerage or somebody that has like dedicated employees, do you think they can apply this model as well? Or is it more for like the coaches, consultants, entrepreneur with contractors?
I think it's custom made for those people who are self-employed like we are. But you even mentioned you're an S Corp, so why wouldn't it work for somebody else? And Mike McAllis has plenty of testimonies to say, yeah, this works for multi-million-dollar businesses. Why wouldn't it? It's cash flow. It's not accounting. I believe anybody could use it if they want to get into it. Would it be more complicated for someone like that? Yeah, you're doing a couple $1 million in business. Your business is a little more complicated. You got employees. Your business is more complicated. But if you're self-employed or you've got a couple contractors, I'll tell you what, this is so easy.
Well, Steve, this has been an awesome conversation. You gave us a lot of great ideas. I think that if you haven't read the book yet, be sure to check out Profit First. I've read it thanks to Seth Silvers. Steve and I, like I said, I've started implementing it. It definitely shifted the way that I allocate my spending. It helped me expand. It helped me scale, and I think that, Steve, you broke it down really well for anybody that's maybe looking to take that next step with their business and really get a control of their finances. You gave us that great link. Tell us, we'll include a link in the show notes to it, but tell us how else we can get in touch with you. If anybody wants some help with editing their podcasts, how can we maybe work with you? Tell us the best way to get in touch with you, Steve.
Sure. 3 ways. If they want to get in touch with me, just find me at stevestewart.me. That's Steve, STEWART.me. If you want help with post-production on your podcast, come contact me. If you're in the personal finance space, I want to work with you. If not, I've got a way to help you find a podcast editor. And it's a way where you're not walking into a room of 9,000 editors saying, hey, I'm looking for an editor. Don't do that. I've got a way that you kind of stay anonymous until you're ready to contact someone and they've given you their information and they've pre-qualified themselves. Finally, if they're into the post-production space and want to create a job for themselves like I have, or do it even better, I've got the Podcast Editor Academy to teach people how to run a business as a podcast editor. It's at podcasteditoracademy.com.
Oh, Steve, this is great. Thank you again so much. We'll include all the links in the show notes. Be sure to check out Profit First. It is a great book, and hopefully it'll change the way you do business, just like it did for me and Steve. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing. I hope you're leaving with valuable insights and the inspiration to lead your market. If you've enjoyed our time together and found today's podcast episode useful, I have a small favor to ask of you. Please hit that subscribe button to stay updated with the latest episodes. And if you know someone who could benefit from these episodes, maybe a fellow business leader or an aspiring entrepreneur, go ahead and share this episode with them. Let's spread the knowledge and grow together. Also, I'd love to hear from you and continue the conversation beyond the podcast. Visit me at katiebrinkley.com to connect, to find more resources, or just to share your journey. And be sure to pick up your copy of my new book, The Social Shift, at katiebrinkley.com/book. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Katie Brinkley, and I can't wait to dive into more strategies and stories with you on the next episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing. Let's keep on taking your marketing to new heights.